Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Sideboard Files here on HEDRON.TV. My name is Manuel, I'm your host, and this time I'm sitting down here with Tobias Mieth. Welcome. How you doing?
Hello everyone, I'm actually really fine today.
Excellent, very good to hear. I'm pretty actually fine as well and excited to talk about Modern again, because this time we talk about a quite popular deck, Death Shadow, and we're going to see your sideboard choices about that shadow, about this deck. And of course, go a little bit in depth with the two specific matchups, Death Shadow versus Urza Tron and Death Shadow versus Death Shadow, the mirror, with all the different variants and stuff, because I think there is quite a bit to talk about.
Definitely. I mean, Death Shadow, after the last bannings and the metagame settled down, is like the go-to deck if you want to play Modern right now. It's the boogeyman of the format, and everyone needs either to play Death Shadow or needs to have a plan how to beat Death Shadow. So I think it's natural to talk about this deck.
Yeah, definitely not to be ignored. All right. As first thing, I would like to have a quick look at your main deck configuration. So let's have a look at your list. And I see that you play somehow the original version, the giant version with a little splash for white. This is your choice. And I think there are still a few flexible slots. Is there anything you would like to talk about?
Yeah, what we can talk about is, for example, the Tarfires in this deck. This is still a Delirium deck. We have Traverse the Ulvenwald, we have Tarmogoyfs. They all live from different types in your graveyard. So Tarfire is an excellent choice normally if you want to raise an opponent, if you want to turn on Delirium for your Traverses. But normally these cards get cut because they're in the end just a shock. And especially when you're playing the mirror, you help your opponent as well as yourself, except for the Delirium. But yeah, this is something special. And I have one Collective Brutality main deck because this helps against combo decks. You still have 8 discard main deck, but this is the 9th discard. And so combo decks is pretty much no problem with this version of the deck. And it helps against burn, which might become troublesome when you're taxing your own life total. And yeah, this could help.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a pretty flexible card, different modes. You can drain life, you can eliminate a threat, and you can also discard instant and sorcery all at once if you want to do it. I mean, if you have 2 cards to discard. And this deck actually can benefit from all the different modes.
Yeah, this feels like a charm, especially made for this deck sometimes. Especially if you can like discard a Liliana, which you can't play because you're stuck on 2 lands, for example. You add another type to your graveyard, and this is overall amazing for your deck.
All right, pretty good. Let's have a look at the sideboard then. We just go back to the sideboard here that we prepared before. There it is. And I would like to ask you, how did you come up with this particular configuration?
So what is important about this configuration is we have white cards. The main deck is just jaunt colors. But in the sideboard we have Lingering Souls, we have a Kataki, and we have a Either Sworn Canonist and the Ranger of Eos. They are pretty potent sideboard cards. Everyone knows white is a pretty good sideboard color. It's really greedy that we have these, but they fulfill important roles. The Either Sworn Canonist is, of course, a bullet against combo decks, especially Storm, Gift Storm, which is the go-to Storm or combo deck right now, except for Ad Nauseam. But against Ad Nauseam, this is, again, a good card you want to have.
Yeah, definitely.
Normally, you would play different white cards, but these are creatures. And the creatures can be tutored with your Traverse the Ulvenwald, which is really important. So you have essentially 5 copies of these in your deck after sideboarding. They just cost 1 mana more, but 3 mana for a bullet, for a silver bullet in this matchup is still a fine deal in my opinion. The Kataki is of course good in different matchups because we have a lot of artifact decks in Modern right now. We have Affinity as always. This will be a mainstay until they ban Plating or they ban Mox Opal. But this will be a mainstay of Modern until the end of time, I think.
Yeah. We never know. Maybe what you said is going to happen, but we don't know when it's going to happen.
We don't know. I think they won't ban it right now because it has consistent finishes, but it's always looming beneath the top. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
I
Not
think it's
dangerous enough.
I think it's a deck to stay right now and to always consider. But it's good against other decks. For example, against Tron, you could play it because Tron uses the X to tutor up for their threats, for their lands, and this can be fine against it, although they tend to sacrifice all of their artifacts anyways. But sometimes when they have like a turn 1 map and you are on the play and play Kentucky turn 2, this can be disastrous for them.
Yeah, sure.
Because they have to sacrifice the map in the upkeep. They can't because they don't have the mana, and then they have to tax their mana for 1 turn. This is pretty amazing. Or other decks like Cracklands Ironwork cropped up a few weeks ago again. And there's a lot you can hit with this. This is an overall decent card. It's not like Stony Silence where you can say you shut down the whole deck, but with your deck you're so proactive you need time, and this buys you a lot of time.
And I have to confess that I actually never saw Ranger of Eos before. I absolutely didn't even know that this card exists.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about the white cards, I would like to know from you, what is this for?
This is for the grind matchups. This is where you need more threats, and this gives you a lot of threats because when you play the Range of Eos, you just take 2 Death Shadows from your deck and you reload. It's like a draw 2 and you draw 2 threats. So this is really, really good in grind matchups.
Okay, so basically all the matchups that they're going a little bit longer. So against control decks or against mid-range decks, is that the kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about it's 4 mana, which is a lot for your deck. Especially if you consider that you have just 6 mana sources possible in your deck. But in these matchups, you can easily go up to 4, 5, or even 6 mana. And with 6 mana, you can do stuff like Traverse for Range of Eos if you rip a Traverse from the top. Play the Ranger, get 2 Death Shadows, and then you can even play 1 Death Shadow in the same turn, which is pretty good. And then you have another Death Shadow for next turn. This is an amazing deal.
Okay. Yeah, sounds pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Lingering Souls, 3 copies, all in the sideboard. So when it's time to side cards in and out, these go in. And what is actually the role of these cards?
As the Range of Eos, because we have the top row, this is like I like to call the grind package.
Okay.
This is for the grindy matchups again. If you need more threats, if you need time to stabilize, this is amazing because you get 4 bodies for 5 mana. Sometimes you can discard it to Liliana, so you discard a card, which even gets you a card out of the graveyard. This is something you always want when the game goes long. If you're playing against mid-range decks, especially, you almost always board this in.
All right, so we covered the white cards, and we can just start talking about a little bit the other cards that you have here in the sideboard. And yeah, I see actually Liliana, the Last Hope, being quite popular in Modern now, and in many sideboard actually. So you chose to include Liliana in your sideboard as well, and what's that for actually?
Yeah, this is good against small creature decks because it can kill a small creature for free, but it can still be good in grand matchups because this can sort of be a Traverse to your Ulvenwald number 5 because you can put some cards in your graveyard and then rebuy a creature. Especially potent with Range of Eos, for example, we talked about. Imagine if you have both of the cards sided in a matchup and then you rebuy a Range of Eos. This is like a lot of power.
Yeah. The synergy here gets really rolling, yeah.
And you can even, if you use the minus, you put some cards in your graveyard, you get Delirium, there's another synergy, and you can even find some of your silver bullets you desperately need and then rebuy them. This is an amazing card for grindy matchups. The problem is you could normally say, for example, in matchups where you need to either Sworn Canonist or Kataki, this might be good to tutor them up. The problem is it costs 3 mana and you still have to play the creature. And so this is too much mana for these matchups, but in the matchups where you have time, amazing. So normally if you need time and slog through a lot of threats, the upper row is
that's the section of your sideboard.
Yeah.
dedicated.
What you definitely need.
Yeah, dedicated to that purpose. Okay, so we jump in the next row. We already talked about Edith One Canonist and Kataki. Yeah, definitely. So the 2 copies of Ancient Grudge here, specific Artifact 8 with flashback. What's that for?
There's a lot of matchups. I mean, Affinity, as we talked about, is always a deck to consider. Lantern Control is a really good matchup where you need these for, because even if Lantern mills them, you can still flash them back. This is totally fine. There are a lot of decks where you can apply them, and it will be always pretty obvious to you if you need them or not. If your opponent is using artifacts for the deck, board them in. But this is like one of the easiest cards to judge whether you need them or you don't need them, because it's on the card already.
Okay. The last row here. We have 3 copies of Fulminator Mage and 1 Collective Brutality and 2 Graph Digger's Cage. I would start with the Fulminator Mage. And I somehow already feel that I have an idea already what is that for most of the time, because it's also a card that most of the time you don't really want to see when your opponent is playing it against you.
What do you think then?
I think it's about getting rid of lands and getting your opponent's color screwed, more or less. But not only that, but that could be one of the options. I mean, it's quite flexible card, but I will let you talk about it.
Yeah, it's definitely what you said. It's for the big mana decks, and it's for decks which are greedy about their mana. I mean, we ourselves are a greedy mana deck, so it's good in the mirror. We will talk about this later. And it's good against stuff like Tron, it's good against Valakut decks, it's good against Lantern decks. Every deck that uses spell-like lands, this is always amazing. So you can always bring this in.
Definitely. Okay. Collective Brutality, we already discussed about all the bonuses given by this card. You have already in the main deck. I think you have 1 copy, right?
One copy in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard.
Okay.
I would like to have more space, but the other cards are more impactful in their matchups. This is I made a concession because I was thinking about playing 4 Fulminator Mages, but then again, if you are expecting a broader metagame, you need something to address a broader metagame, and it's like a charm, so you can bring it in a lot of matchups, and it's always, you have to consider if you want this on the draw or on the play, because this is a 2 mana discard card. Normally this card is 1 mana, and this becomes much worse on the draw than on the play, but we will talk about this later again.
All right. Last but not least, 2 copies of Graph Digger's Cage.
Yeah. There might still some people playing Dredge, especially as Dredge is really good against the Death Shadow decks in any kind of version. So Graph Digger's Cages are for Dredge, for example, but you still can use this in graveyard-based decks like Gift Storm, like Grixis control decks where they have Snapcaster Mages, even against Grixis Death Shadow where they have Snapcaster Mages. It's always a good card. Even against Lantern Control, for example, where they want to rebuy stuff from their own graveyard. Might be decent. Yeah.
Okay, pretty flexible actually. And you have to be prepared for the Dredge matchup, because it's a matchup that is not super easy for you. Definitely. As far as I understood.
I mean, it's again a really flexible card. There might still be collected company decks running around. It's good against them as well.
Okay, pretty cool. Okay, we had a look at the whole thing about the sideboard. We talked about the whole package of cards. We can now talk about the specific matchups that we have for this episode. And I would like to start with Death Shadow versus Urza Tron. The question that I would like to ask you, Tobias, is what are your objectives in Game 2 for this particular matchup?
The objective in this matchup is to raise them. You want to have your own game plan, be very proactive, so you can win before they can even achieve their glorious 7 mana to play their threats which are more potent than your threats. This can be achieved by 2 things. First of all, don't over-sideboard, because you don't want to stop your own plan, just get rid of the bad cards. And second of all, you have to stop their mana to unfold, which means you have to target their lands, and you have to target the ways to find those lands. So this card is pretty important, and land destruction.
Okay, very good. Let's assume that you won game 1. So in game 2, you're going to be on the draw.
Mm-hmm.
What do you side out and what do you side in?
So for this matchup, the boarding is on the draw and on the play pretty much the same, because the only really bad cards you have are the Fatal Pushes and the Collective Brutality you have mainly. The other ones are still okay to great. And even the Gork Clan Rampager you bought out, which is the 6th card you bought out, it might be decent to keep it in, but it's normally too slow because the spot it fulfills is to raise, and a Teemo Battle Rage does it much better than a Gork Clan Rampager.
Okay.
So this is what you bought out, and what you bring in is the 3 Fulminator Mages, because you want to hit their lands, you want to target one of their Tron lands, so they have a harder time achieving Tron. And what you bought in as well is the Kataki. The Kataki is good against their artifacts, which they need to tutor up their Tron, and the same for Ancient Grudge. If you can hit like a expedition map with an Ancient Grudge, this can be decent, because it stops them sometimes from achieving Tron, and then you can just kill them.
All right, very good. We said that this is actually the same plan on the play, on the draw. Nothing to add actually here. And we can skip directly to the next matchup, actually.
Definitely.
It's going to be a little bit more complex, actually. Death Shadow versus Death Shadow, the mirror. What are your objectives in game 2 in the mirror?
The objectives for the game 2 in the mirror are have the better top decks. This is a match which goes long. This is reminiscent of Junt against Abzan or some other black-green whatever decks against each other. So you want to grind. You don't want to top deck a Thoughtseize in turn 16 or whatever with 2 life left. You want to top deck another Liliana, a Lingering Souls, whatever, something which you can turn into cash immediately. So therefore, you need to get rid of your hand disruption, stuff which is bad top decks, and you have to bring in much more expensive spells. It's about expensive spells, and it's about more threats, because you want a never-ending stream of threats and then out-threat your opponent in the end. This is what your plan is.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the same question as before. Let's assume that you won game 1. In game 2, you are on the draw. What do you side out and what do you side in?
This depends a bit on the version you're playing against, but we can say if you're playing against normal Abzan or Junt versions, not against Grixis stuff, for example, or against, they're even listed really go into the mid-range version. They have like 3 Lilianas or 2 Abrupt Decays main deck. We're not talking about this. We're talking about the normal Death Shadow decks. What you always get rid of is the Teemo Battle Rages and the Gork Clan Rampagers. You never want these because they are potential 2-for-1s. You don't want to get 2-for-1 because this is a grind matchup and you can't afford to lose a card just because you play, I don't know, Teemo Battle Rage on your Death Shadow to win and then it gets fatal pushed. This is atrocious.
Yeah, pretty bad.
This is the way to lose the games. Then I personally like to get rid of the Thoughtseizes, because hand disruption might be still fine sometimes to have some, but then I prefer the Inquisition of Kozilek, because you can wait for your Death Shadows. You don't want to rush them out, because sometimes you even get hit by a Golf once, for example, and that's the life loss you needed for your Death Shadows to be played. But Thoughtseizes might sometimes be a liability when you hit your own life total when you can't afford to do it. So on the draw, I like to keep in 4 Inquisitions, but take out all the 4 Thoughtseizes, for example. And same is with the Collective Brutality. As I said before, they are not that good on the draw. So bought these out.
All right, okay. And what do you bought in?
So what I bought in is the Fulminator Mages. It might sound a bit weird, and I surprised some people when I did this first, but then they realized, well, the mana base is really greedy. So why not hit the mana base? You can see in our own deck we have 1 white source of mana.
Yeah, true.
And if you Fulminator this, all your glorious Lingering Souls are only prone to be flashbacked, and that's about it. Or your Range of Eos, which you bring in this matchup, you can't play it anymore.
Yeah.
So Fulminator mages are great overall. I mean, our version has 4 shocklands. If you Fulminator all of the shocklands, well, they have 2 basics left, and then that's it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely true.
Bring in the 3 Fulminator mages, bring in Liliana the Last Hope. Liliana the Last Hope, it's a card that's so flexible in this matchup and which can grind really well. You can have it be a threat by plussing it all over again and then threatening to ultimate. You can minus it to get more creatures. It's really amazing, especially if you need to turn on Delirium, because to turn on Delirium after sideboarding can sometimes be a bit tough, but I personally like to keep in the Tarfires for that, but it's even decent to board it out at times, and then Liliana is your go-to way to turn on Delirium. Another thing you board in is the Range of Ears, as I said before, because this gets you more Death Shadows, more threats, more threats, more threats. That's all the matchup is about, more threats. And this is 3 threats in 1.
Yeah, very true, very true.
And Lingering Souls is like the same card. It's 4 threats in 1. Essentially, the threats are not that potent, but if you consider that your opponent is boarding out Battle Rage and Gorklan Rampager as well, there's nothing you have to be afraid of when you just rely on these jump blockers to buy some time. And sometimes if you're terribly behind, sometimes ripping this card gives you enough time to catch up, for example. So this card is definitely amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it helps you maximizing the density of threats.
Oh, yeah.
And this is actually what you want to do.
And it's even good to discard this to Liliana. I mean, this is a known recipe from Absa mid-range decks, and you can still do this in your Death Shadow deck.
Definitely. Absolutely. Also with the collective brutality and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's assume now that you were not so lucky actually in game 1, so you lost game 1.
I can't imagine that.
Interesting theory. Let's keep it in theory. So in game 2, you're going to be on the play. Is the plan still the same, or is it going to change?
It's a bit different, because what we bought out again is the Teemo Battle Rage, the Gorklan Rampager, the Thought Seizes I like to board out, but I won't board out the Collective Brutality, for example, because on the play it's a bit better, because playing a Collective Brutality on turn 2 is still fine on the play. On the draw, it might be too slow sometimes. I mean, normally you don't have too much hand disruption to worry about in a game 2 or 3. But that's one thing you have to consider. People are boarding differently. There's no consensus of how to board correctly. Sometimes you can be surprised people are keeping their hand disruption in, are keeping their battle rages in, and they just want to go under your game plan, because your game plan is to have your cards being more expensive, more impactful in the mid to late game, and then they just discard you again, then play a threat, and then battle rage you and you're death. But this is not something you should normally expect. So that's why you keep in the brutality. You board in even the second from the sideboard, and for that you have 2 Inquisitions you cut then.
Okay.
And just keep in 2 Inquisitions. Sometimes you can even consider cutting these Inquisitions as well and then mixing this up with the Tarfire stuff. So there's some flexible boarding possibilities there.
But your choice is cutting the 2 Inquisition.
Exactly. And leaving 2 in, and that's about the hand disruption. You have 2 Inquisitions and 2 Collective Brutalities, 1 from the main deck, 1 from the sideboard.
All right. So these are the cards that you board out, and the cards you board in?
Brutality comes in. We have the grind package again, the Lingering Souls, we have the Liliana.
The collective is the only change in the end. All the other cards are there.
Yeah, that's essentially the only change on the draw and the play, because the brutality is not that good on the draw, as we already mentioned, but you keep it in on the play and add another brutality.
So you have to.
Genau. Exactly. That's one thing you could add if you're talking about different variants of Death Shadow. For example, if you're playing against Grixis, one card you might not consider at first, but it's actually pretty decent, is the Grafdigger's Cage, for example, because it shuts off Snapcaster Mage, of course. And Snapcaster Mage is a card you never want to see in these grindy matchups because it's a 2-for-1 in itself, and that makes it just a 2-1 with flash, then this is okay for you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that's it for this episode. Thank you very much, Toby, for being here.
As always, I'm thrilled.
And a big thank you to all of you who've been watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, because we surely did. Stay tuned on HEDRON.TV for more content to come, and for now, it's goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.